idea was about decision making, right? The whole concept was called multi-criteria decision making. What do I mean by multi-criteria decision making? Multi-criteria. What does that mean, that little emphasis in the beginning?
There's many different aspects to it.
Exactly. There are different things that help or affect your decision, right? When you decided to come to Loyola, there's a next problem you're going to see, by the way. I'm going to have you do a reading assignment probably over the weekend that's about choosing the right college. You kind of did that, right, with Loyola coming to high school. When I was younger, I went to public school. I went out in Long Island public school, West Islip. I didn't choose a high school. I was in public school my whole life. So it was new to me when I went to college, and I was going to college, this whole process of figuring out what college works best for you and why it works best, what you can afford, where it is, the academics, all that stuff, right? So when you came to Loyola, what were some of the criteria that you decided, or the criteria that you used to decide? What were some of the criteria? Be honest, anything, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be about Loyola specifically, but generally the categories of criteria, what did you use?
Community.
The community involved, okay? So what kind of a community is it at the school? What kind of a field does it have?
College, college system,
College placement system. So where do Loyola seniors end up going to college? Does that affect if you want to come to Loyola? Sure, like a feeder, if you will. Yeah? Extracurriculars, for sure. I mean, for a small school, by the way, we have a ton of extracurriculars here. It doesn't 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we started Science Club. And when we started Science Club in the U.S. Joseph, that same year, there were 5 or 6 other clubs started. So prior to a couple of new teachers being here, there weren't as many clubs here. There are so many clubs when you actually think about it. Compared to a school of 2,000 people that might have twice as many clubs, but we have 200 students here, right? And we might have half as many clubs, which is kind of insane. You have 50% amount of clubs, there's other schools that are huge, and yet they have 10 times as many students there. So we have a lot of those options. What else? Obviously, what else is really important when you're going to school? Academics, okay. The actual academic rigor in the school, what kind of a tracking does the school have? For example, are you going to end up in calculus? I mean, you guys all should, right? On the honors math track, it's Algebra 2 honors, Geometry honors, Pre-Calc honors, AP calculus. That's the track that you're kind of on right now. What else? The commute, possibly, for you guys? How many people commute from more than 30 minutes away? Your commute takes you more than 30 minutes in the morning. Anybody more than an hour, out of curiosity? Are you really? Where do you ladies commute from?
Douglaston, Manhasset.
Manhasset and what?
Douglaston. It's it's physically on Long Island, but it's the last town in New York City.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. And you're where?
Manhasset.
Manhasset?
It's by Port Washington.
Okay. I'm from, I said West Islip. So Port Washington's out east also, right?
No, it's more in. It's by Queens. It's 10 minutes away from your house.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's a huge criteria, right? Your commute in the morning. I know that a couple students that had come here in the past, eventually the commute was very difficult on them. So I remember one student that did end up transferring simply because he transferred into a school that was maybe 10 minutes away. Very different subject, very different case. But the commute could be worth it sometimes. I commuted here to work from Brooklyn for the last 5 years, and it'd take me about 50 minutes to maybe an hour every morning. And in the beginning, I was really it was killing me because I would have to get up really early and come in. But I did like it because I used to read on the train. So you find out that criteria might not affect you as much depending on what you make of it, right? And that's what we're going to get into in this next part here. So once you figure out the criteria, and you guys already read this, so I'm going through some of this stuff before I even get to the slides. Once you figured out the criteria, you started to categorize stuff, right? You gave values to certain things. And then at the very end, you said, what are my preferences? What criteria matter the most to me personally? And then you gave what was called that weighting. So let's talk about all these different things that you read in the book that might have been confusing at first, but we'll go through them. The idea of this project, by the way, just to give you an overview, is that you're going to individually choose something to make a decision about. And it's totally up to you. But it's got to be something that's reasonable. I don't want you to just make something up to make it up. It's got to be something that you're interested in, and you need to give me reasons and rationale as to why you're interested in that. In addition to that, I need something where you can have multiple criteria that affect it. So obviously, it can't be something where, the decision is between a movie at 7 and a movie at 9 p.m. And I like earlier movies, I don't like later movies, I'm done, I'm choosing the 7 o'clock movie. Yeah, you know what I mean? That's one criteria you're basing it on. I want it to be something as involved as these kinds of problems you're seeing. So the first one that you read about was about the cell phone choice, right? The cell phone plan. Did you like the names, by the way? Horizon. What was another one? Something T and...
Something about AT&T. like.
But it was another name for it, yeah. These, by the way, these are not things that I've created. You'll see actually the author's names. That's right out of this text. But I was involved in a summer program at Columbia with a bunch of other engineers and teachers who helped to work on this book. But this was years ago. To help to work on this book itself. These are the guys that actually presented it. They were actually really funny guys. Both of them were really funny. So this is their slides that they actually allowed us to use. So they're encouraging teachers to use this book to teach about real decision-making ideas. And I try to push this into projects more than anything. So some of these examples in these slides talk about their corporate decisions that people have to make in the corporate world. You know, if you're going to buy technology, like at Loyola, to be honest, we have some of the best technology. And whether or not, like, I know some students sometimes are like, oh, the Wi-Fi is so slow today. And like, that happens. It definitely happens at times, for sure. But that's anywhere. But as far as like technology that's around, it's incredible. Mr. Richroth was the old IT director for the last like 15 years. He built from nothing to what we have now. Like, we literally had no technology at this school before I came here. Laptops are new, iPads, there's laptops in the engineering room, there's 3D print. I mean, there's so much technology, it's crazy. So do you want to invest in the cost of technology and get good performance out of it? Or do you want to think about like low cost and maybe you don't get the best performance? So those are like decisions you have to make in the corporate world. A school is not a corporation, but it acts in the same way at times for these big money decisions, right? And then this other one is locating the manufacturing plant or a retail outlet. So if you're like actually getting stuff or you're building stuff in the US, or if you're shipping outside or wherever your plant is, whatever the costs are. So those are just decisions they make in the corporate world. Government makes decisions about locations for things, like where an airport is, where a landfill is. I mean, these are huge decisions. If there's a landfill near where you live, I mean, it smells, right? You know what a landfill smells like. The whole idea is that it's trash, unfortunately. So these decisions are big. A stadium. I mean, Yankee Stadium, think about where it is. It's right off the 4-5 train, or the 4 train, actually, I guess, right? Yeah, it's on the 4 train. Like, that's a big decision, the fact that it's right off of the subway. Citi Field being right off of the 7 line, for example. I'm thinking about, you know, Mets and Yankees right now for stadiums. And then airports also. Did you know LaGuardia was originally not supposed to be where it was? And in the last, like, 10 years, they proposed the idea of moving LaGuardia completely. There's is it called Rikers Island? Is that the jail facility? There was an idea to actually move all of LaGuardia Airport to Rikers Island, and then access Rikers Island directly with subways also, so you could take the subway right to the airport. I personally think the subway should definitely go right to the airport. The fact that it's only buses that can go to the airports in New York is like terrible. I mean, I guess the JFK you could take the AirTran, and then Newark you can take the PATH or New Jersey Transit and stuff. But it's really difficult to get around here if you're working on public transportation. I found as far as with airports. So location of them, and again, when were these airports founded? They were probably founded a long time ago, right? They were built way before they had issues with overpopulation that we have now, A, and B, with getting around. Like physically just getting around New York City is insane. I was on the way home on Sunday from IKEA. It took me 2 hours to get from the Brooklyn IKEA to pretty much around this school area. That's where I actually live now, around this area. And it should be like a 25-minute ride, and it was like 2 hours and 10 minutes. It was absurd. And it was all this stuff that was going on the east side. Part of it was the UN this week being here on the east side, but a lot of it had to do with actual construction that was going on, with lanes closed left and right. So we have to consider the locations of things and how it's going to change in the future. Some personnel choices for drafts as far as this. I mean, how many of you are big sports fans, even if you play or watch, either one? Okay, a sport in general. Okay, so tomorrow, let's see what we're going to do. Tomorrow we have a little bit of time to review. Your first test is on Friday. Don't be nervous about your first test. It's going to be your easiest test of the year. We'll spend a little bit of time doing a little more on the project tomorrow. Probably half the period, then half the period reviewing. Thursday you have off. Friday is your test. Over the weekend I'll give you another reading assignment. Okay? If you want to come tomorrow morning for office hours, you can. If not, today after school is fine, and Thursday after school should be fine. I think tomorrow I have a doc's appointment. I have to schedule it, so it's either tomorrow or Thursday. So, okay, if you want to come today or tomorrow morning for sure, I'll be here for those times. So these are some, personal interests that you may use a multi-criteria decision-making approach on. So what professor you're going to take? A lot of people in college look at, you can see professor ratings online that exist. You get word of mouth from friends. You hear about how difficult they are, how easy they are. Well, what day does the actual course meet? Is it a night class? Is it a 3-hour class? Is it a 1-hour class? Is it an hour and 15-minute classes? They all vary. So when you get to college, it's a huge decision. I'll give you a little fun story because I like to give stories. When I was in college, freshman year, in the first semester, you don't really get to pick your classes. You based on your major, and you assign your classes for the first semester. For the second semester, though, I got to pick my classes. And I came out of high school and I had a lot of AP credit, so I had more credit going into college than some of my classmates. So I was lucky enough to be able to be one of the first ones to register. Based on your credit level, if you have more credits complete, you actually register before your classmates, which is cool, in your grade. So what I did, though, because I didn't know that I had early registration time, I thought it was pretty much the same as everybody, I created an Excel spreadsheet with like 7 different templates of schedules that I wanted in case that the course was filled up. So like, if my math class I really wanted filled up, I wanted a secondary math class, right? Well, then as a result, everything would change as a function of that. So when I was thinking about my professors and courses, I did all of this. But I used like not multi-criteria, I just used my brain, and I kind of said like, let me just think about the approach to take here. So sometimes courses met Monday, Wednesday, Friday for an hour each. Sometimes they met Tuesday, Thursday for an hour and a half instead. Sometimes courses met for 3 hours in one chunk, which I didn't really like. I did a little more of that in grad school, but in undergrad I tried to stick to like the shorter classes that meet more frequently. But I was sitting there with registration, like literally ready to copy and paste the course code in. Turned out that I didn't have to worry about it. But planning for something like this takes more than just saying to yourself on the day of, oh, what do I want to do? You actually need to plan ahead of time for it. So I may not have done this in a mathematical approach by assigning weights and weightings to each thing and powers and values to each category, but I kind of did it without inherently doing it itself. Cell phone plan we already talked about real quick. We're going to get into a little bit of math behind it. College, a used car, a health insurance plan, more for an adult. There are a lot of features to health insurance plans that you have to think about. Do you have a family? Are you a single person? Do you use a lot of medical? Is one of your family members actually sick that has a disease that needs to be currently treated? So your plan needs to account for that. So it depends on your family situation. And then hotel, that can be based on many. What parameters would a hotel be based on? Give me some that would be real quick parameters. Location. Price. Size. And number of rooms it can accommodate. Also room possibilities. Ratings, reviews. Those are good, right? That's pretty much what you would use. Okay, so we're going to see as we talk about these different topics, different things come into play. Now, here is the general step. And you read a little bit about this, but let's discuss real quick. Does it make any sense to have numbers that are arbitrary as ratings? It works if everything were the same, but every hotel changes, every place changes. So we want to universalize, is that a word? Probably not. We want to calibrate, we want to calibrate all of our scales from 0 to 1. Calibrate is another word. So we want to take ratings that we give and convert them from 0s to 1 to make the math make sense. For example, a school might give you an average SAT score, okay? And the average SAT score of that school might be out of 1,600, maybe it's 1,300. Pretty good school, decent. So you might want to convert that to an actual value as a decimal, so that when you're giving ratings later, you think about, oh, do you want a good SAT college, or a good academic school, or a poor academic school? Are you going to party, or are you going to study? And you can do both, obviously. Are you going to like the school because of the community service? How do you give ratings for those kinds of things? You have to give numbers, and use numbers between 0 and 1 traditionally. So if you had 3 different schools you're comparing, college-wise, and you think about the service programs of those schools, you might give 1 a 0, 1 a 1, and 1 a 2. Well, try to make everything 0 to 1. You might give it like a 2, a 4, and an 8 if you're thinking from 1 to 10. Then you have to convert. So you take the ends of your scale and use that as your total scale. So for example, I'll put numbers up so you can see this. It's easier to see it now instead of reading here a little bit later. If you think about numbers, oh God, this is not good enough. What is this stuff? If you think about numbers such as, let's say you're giving ratings, and you're rating distances from school to home, and you have like 150 miles. In this they're going to do this later. 200 miles, 220 miles, 70 miles away, meaning you're closer, and then 280 miles. Now, which is the best option? Think about it before you answer. This is how far you are from home when you're in college. Which is the best option?
It depends on your preference.
Very good. So, it depends on the person making the decision. So let's say I'm making a decision and I'm, I kind of want to be as far from my parents as possible while I'm in college. I love them to death, but I kind of want to get that distance, right? So this would be the best score there, wouldn't it? So we'll give this a 1. That's always going to be your top score as a 1. That's what we're converting. And then as a result, this would be a 0. And then everything else between, what do you think? How to figure it out?
You convert it to decimals within 0 and 1.
Yeah, proportionally, right? What's the gap? What's the gap there? 280 and 70. The gap is how much? 210. Well, this is 80 above that. Agreed? It's 80 above the starting point. So this value would be 80 out of 210. The next one. If I go from here, I go from 70 to 200. Well, that's going to be 130 out of 210. 150 out of 210. And then this is going to be 210 out of 210, which is 1. So I think about the fraction as it is with respect to the starting value, which is like my worst rating. Does that make sense what I'm saying here? Okay, I know you read about this in the book, so please nod if it makes sense. If it doesn't, I'm doing this for that reason. Yeah.
Could you also do it like a scale from 0 to 1, so like 200.5 because sort of in between, and like 1 to be 0.25?
You usually want to use your endpoints as your zeros and ones. Because it depends on, if even though this is in between, you might call it 0.5. Well, look, this goes 80 up. This goes 130 down. So you'd end up with a negative number there for that, right? So it would make sense to use the zeros and ones as the endpoints first. Some rankings are not quantitative. What do we call them if they're not quantitative? What's the other word in your book you mentioned?
Qualitative.
Qualitative. What do you do with a qualitative value? What do you do with a qualitative?
You define it with characteristics.
Yeah, you look at the characteristics of it and then assign numbers to that. You think about what's best and what's worse, and you have to be reasonable. So for example, if you think about the cell phone plan, let's jump ahead to the cell phone plan now so we can see some of these categories. I'm going to jump ahead a couple slides, okay? These are the 3 options in this chapter, by the way. So you're going to read about selecting a college over the next couple of days. Okay, you already read about choose a wireless. All right, so here are the options right here. And we're going to see that a lot of these, they use SAR, so they use, I guess, categorical or something, right? And a lot of these are not numerical values whatsoever. So quality of service, right? Quality of service, sure, you can get a ratings value from users that give a rating on the service. So, consumer reports say that, Verizon has a 4 out of 5 star. Maybe, I don't know, whatever it is, right? Please use Verizon. But the idea is that it's really not a numerical value unless you have data for that. So for quality of service, if I recall correctly, I think the options were, where is it? Yeah, excellent, very good, and good. So yes, these are numbers. So the data plan, that's easy to work, right? 12.5 and 15 and 7.5, those are your 0 and 1. Right off the bat. And you want something with what? More or less data, if you're thinking about it. More, right? So you give 15 a 1, and 7.5 would become your 0. Then these in betweens would show up as what? 0.25 or, no, sorry, 0.33 and 0.66. Now, quality of service, though, unfortunately, we don't have numbers for that, so we have to assign numbers. There was a question I think your book posed at some point. Why wasn't there a quality of service listed as poor? Or not good, meaning poor quality of service, right? Why wouldn't that be listed? Why wouldn't that ever be listed?
Because you're not. Wait. I know what it is. But I'm trying to word it. You're not. Wait. Okay. You're not applying for that type of. I can't word it.
You're on the right track. You need to get your words together first. Go ahead, Valentina.
Wants bad.
Nobody wants bad service. So just say it then. Say what you think. You don't have to make it fancy. Nobody wants bad service. Nobody wants something that says, hey, we have terrible cell service. Come get our plan today, right? So obviously those wouldn't even be considered categories here. We should really consider them. So those are our 4 types of measurements, and the values themselves alter. So we talked about questions like this a moment ago, direction or preference. Depends on what you're looking for. In this case, they say shorter is better. You have flexibility to go with another plan. Or is longer better? You can lock in the price for 2 years at that cell phone rate, and you know you're not going to go up in price. Depends on what you're looking for. I was looking at cable providers. Spectrum or Verizon. That's pretty much all there is in the city here. And I actually happen to have a place where you have both options. In the past, I didn't. So I looked into that. I ended up choosing Verizon simply because of the fact that it was a lower monthly cost right now. It was only a 1-year contract. Spectrum was a 2-year contract and it was $20 more. So for me, it was a no-brainer. But with Spectrum, I was getting, I think, like a little bit more speed on internet. I don't use that much internet, so I didn't care about that as much. So I made a decision based on multiple criteria. I didn't analyze it with numbers and math, but I kind of used common sense, right? So when we talk about this, we're talking about decisions that would be something that would be a little bit more elaborate or something that means more than what your, internet provider is. It's not going to really affect you every day. I mean, sure, maybe you can't stream Netflix or maybe it doesn't work well. You just fix it, call, get a faster speed, whatever, right? You can change that. But when you choose colleges and you're at college, then it's a bigger deal, isn't it? So those other decisions that you have to make that might be more important could warrant some mathematical basis, whereas an internet provider, who really cares in the end of the day? It's not the end of the world, right? All right, let's fly through this a little bit because I know we did a lot of this here. Yeah, why no poor? Like, why isn't the list poor as an option? We said. So this is an option, and this is something that I want you to consider. For your project, you're going to have to gather data. So you're going to have to pick something that has some sort of measurable data involved in it, and multiple criteria, not just 2 criteria. So how would you go about gathering the data for any alternative? You got to think about what you're interested in. So when you start to conceive the project you want to work on, you have to start thinking about, is it available? Are there numbers available for this? Is there a way to quantify something that is a qualitative feature, right? That is not necessarily quantitative. Can you come up with numbers based for that? All right, so most preferred is 1, least preferred is 0. We talked about that already. So categorically, usually yes is 1 and no is 0, if it's a yes, no. Unless yes is bad. If it says like, could this end in you getting locked in prison? I don't know what the decision would be made, right? Then the answer yes would be the 0, right? And the answer no would be a 1. You follow what I mean? So it depends on what you're actually looking at to know whether it's 0 or 1 is good or bad for yes or no. And then we talked about the intermediate values, and those have to be proportional. We wrote may here, but say have to for now. So these are the values we're looking at right here. Okay, those are scales or continuums that we worked with for this example. Those are the actual values. Take a look at the common units, the recalibrated units, if you will. Do they make sense to you? The first one should make sense because it's just proportional, right? Down 2.5, down 2.5, down 2.5. Splits this into thirds. 7 to 10 is 2.5. 10 to this is 2.5. This to this is 2.5. This thirds. So these are in thirds. Yes or no, 0 and 1. Quality, 1.50. How about this last one here? Contract length. 1.25 and 0. What argument could you make, obviously? What's the argument you can make there? Where does the 0.25 come from? What should it be if you just did quick math and you just looked at the numbers? What should it be?
1.5.
Just 0.5.
Yeah.
0.5.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah. Only 0.5 because it's 0, 1, and 2, right? 1 is halfway between 0 and 2. The concern here is that although these are numbers, these are not necessarily proportional because of contract length being something different. Yeah, data, obviously, as you get more, it's going to go up more. But contract length, you don't care as much maybe after the first year is the idea. If you're going to be stuck in for 1 year, what's 1 more year? That's the mentality here, which is why 0.25 is used. Also to raise that question of, are all quantitative values easily proportional? Some are, like the data, again, makes more sense to use a proportional setup. But here, it's like, you know what? The process of getting it to come in, to install it already is a headache, right? When you get cable service, you gotta be home, it's a headache there. Once you have it for a year, it's not much worse than having it for 2 years because then you gotta bring it back after a year. You gotta take all the equipment back. So there's those other things that make a year not really that bad when compared to 2 years. So when we look at these values, we'll see, all right, you know what? If I'm willing to wait out for a year, waiting out for 2 years is not much worse, so it's only gonna go down by 1.25. Had it been 0.5, we'd really say after a year, well, it's half as much of a headache. It's not. It involves actually bringing it back to the store, dealing. Like I literally returned my Spectrum stuff months ago. I still have a bill for $600 for unreturned equipment. I have a receipt for it that day, and I've been calling them. Like, that's a headache, right? So changing it every year, although it seems like it should be exactly 0.5, it's not, because you know what, you already got the equipment, it's already set up, all those headaches are gone. So people have a tendency to say, I don't want to deal with him coming in to change my internet provider, I'll stay for a second year. So 1 and 2 years isn't very different there. That's why it's closer in value. Okay, that's why it's not proportional there. This is reasonable in a sense. These were the values that were collected. These are the obviously fake values that were collected for every overage fee, for every gigabyte extra, the monthly charge, contract length, the data plan that it comes with. And now we need to take these things and give them actual values. If we look, we're showing the proportional part. I'm going to skip this. This is what we just said a moment ago, where you look at all of your fractions. It's on the board on the right. I can do this for a lot of them. All right, so these are all turned into values, okay? So once all those values that we saw on the previous table a couple of slides ago are turned into values from 0 to 1, we can then sum them together and get an average. Clearly, the one with the most total points will have the highest average. So right now, USTNT has the best average rating, so you would choose them. The other two are pretty spot on, though, from each other, or pretty close to one another. But this doesn't take into account your personal preference. What did the book talk about for your personal preference? What was the idea there? How do you account for your personal preference? What was the idea for personal preference? Isabella? Oops.
I think it was conducting an interview.
It was conducting an interview. What did you mean by conducting an interview? You're on the right track. It'll come back. What do we mean by conducting an interview? Yeah, I'm asking you.
It's like asking yourself what you want, what you would want.
Yeah, what do you care about the most? So no longer what's the best, what's worst. That question already happened, right? What is the best data plan? What was the most? Clear. So this data plan got a 1. You already asked that question. Now the question posed is, what do you care about? Sebastian, out of all of these things, all of them, I should say up until quality of service really, what do you care about most? Data plan. Okay. So my iPencil is clearly dead, or it's just not working again. So let's try this. So data plan would be the first thing that you would point out. So that would give you the highest weighting. You're going to do what's called a weighted value now. So we'll give that 100. It makes it really easy to make numbers between 0 and 1 and 0 and 100, right? So we're going to give the data plan value 100. What would be the next thing that you would say would matter to you?
Total monthly charge.
Agreed, totally. I think that's the most logical approach. These two are probably numbers 1 and 2 for almost everybody. Now, what if your job was a consulting job and you traveled across the country? What do you think would be a one that would be toward the top if you're traveling all over the place? Overage fee, good for gigabyte because you're always on the road. So if you're using a lot of data on the road, very good. And what else?
Rollover data.
Rollover data could be useful for the data you don't use the previous month. There's one that you're not seeing. But you think about traveling geographically.
Like it's coverage.
Coverage is not there, right? Coverage isn't listed here. It's kind of in quality of service in a sense. But quality can mean how good the calls are for a drop. But coverage would be a whole other category that we have to add to this, agreed? Coverage throughout the U.S. So if you know you're staying in the local area, and you know what? There's a cell phone provider out there now. There's tons of cell phone providers outside of what the usual 3 are that everybody knows. The 3 now, or I guess 4, right? T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon. Are those the main 4, or do 2 of them combine at some point? I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's Boost, there's Metro PCS, there's all these different private, there are like 30, 40 data plans you can use or phone plans you can use in New York alone. And a lot of those work really, really well in New York. And sometimes some of them don't work well outside or in other areas. But you know what? If you won't travel much and you're 60 years old and you're an older person and you're home and you're like a grandma and you want like a simple phone, you might go with one of those Boost plans that only charges $30 a month. You get most of them, you get the unlimited data actually. The whole data capping thing is a big deal that Verizon and all the big ones picked up because data is money. Data is money. Before data was around, it was all about minutes. Everybody had minute caps. I had 700 minutes a month. That was my original plan, I remember. That was in college, freshman year. 700 minutes on the phone. Data didn't exist. I could send texts, up to 200 texts, and 700 minutes. Anything over than minutes or text was an overage charge, or both. Now, texts and minutes are unlimited. So they added this idea of data. it's a whole game. It's fake. It's completely fake. There are no such things as data caps. They implement them to charge you money. You do realize this, right? Like, think about it logically. What is data? Data is some cloud storage. So what? They've got server farms on server farms on server farms that are storing your data. Verizon doesn't even store your data. They outsource to another company, so in case there's a data breach, they don't have to deal with it. So you're not paying for data. You're paying for this invisible limit that these companies have collaborated in some dark room with the devil and said, you know what? Let's make data expensive these days. We gotta make more money. So it's the truth. It really is kind of scary when you think about it. So that's what they've done. That's why it used to be unlimited for a long time, and then they introduced it all this, and now it's like, oh, we're back to unlimited. It's like, well, that's actually the way it should be for all data plans. So you're paying more for that because they just want to make money off of you. Anyway, total side effect. So coverage could be affected. So when you think about weightings, give them values. Let's see if my pencil's working again. So give them, it is, nice. So give them values. And what you're going to do is you're going to give the best one the highest value. After that, you give one scores or rates. So let's say I'll give this an 80. I'll give overage fees if it matters to me a 70. Contract length matters a little bit. That's a 50. I don't really care about rollover because I never go over maybe. So then overage wouldn't matter actually to me, so I shouldn't put that there. So make this a 40. Make that a 30. They just kind of go together, by the way, rollover and overage. And then quality of service. I'm always in New York. I always have good quality for all these lines. So I don't care. So those are my weightings. What did the book say to do next? What do you remember? Once you give all the weightings. What do you give all the weightings? What do you do after that? Somebody besides more. We've answered a couple questions today. I want to get into it. So tell me if you read usually, right? And I know some of you read, maybe just forget it right now. Try to volunteer when you can when I ask these kinds of questions. I know you're doing the work. What did the book ask you to do now? We can't use these numbers, right? We have to somehow calibrate them again.
Do you convert them to like 0 and 1?
Yeah, we converted it again to a decimal, right? And how do we do that? We added up all the scores themselves. We then took the actual value of that score into the total value to see the proportional. Let me show you the math behind it. We did the math a little bit later. So there's the 100, right? We talked about 100 points at the highest ranked measure, and then after that we did that. We totaled all the points. Divide the individual points by the total. It'll give you a decimal. So let me just show you the math so it's easier. Here we go. So here's our actual points. So from 100, monthly charge is the most important to this person. That's 100. The total points is down here. 100 divided by the total points gives you the weighting. The weighting is a proportional value. This means the most out of the 340 points. It's got the highest value, so its weighting is clearly the highest out of all of these. Okay, on the far right. So again, just take the individual rating, no matter what it is. Say there's 20 divided by 340, and that's 0.06. This is the total amount. What are we going to do with these weights now? What's the next step? Who remembers? What am I doing with these weights? I can't just write down the weights. I want to incorporate them into my math.
You calculate the average so you know which is closest to your highest standard.
You could use the average, but you don't need the average right now. You don't need the average. We're going to do something else with the weights. We're going to do something else.
I think you just add them up.
Well, to show that it adds up to 1, you can add them up. That's fine. But after that,
Wait, does it always add up to 1?
think about it. Do the math. If you added all these up, wouldn't these add up to 340? And isn't 340 out of 340 1? Since these are all percentages, really, this is like 100 out of 340 is this. So all the fractions out of 340 should add up to 340. So it's always going to be a 1 here to check. What do I do with these weights? Come on, guys. I don't just leave them here. I have to do something with them. I need to incorporate them into my problem. Nobody remembers? Which is the most important category? Read it, literally. What's the name of that category?
Monthly charge.
So you take the weight, and what do you think you're going to do to all the monthly charges? You can't really add it, right? So what's the thing we do in math when you want to scale something? Yeah, you're going to use this as a multiplier on all the monthly charges. Look at the next thing. So remember it was 0.29 was the weighting? 0.29 was the monthly charge weighting that you gave it. 0.29 times whatever the value for Trot goes here. 0.29 times the USTNT goes here. 0.29 times the Horizon value goes here. These are your new values. You take your weightings and multiply by what was in those cells accordingly. This gives it a weighted average. Now look at your answer. What's the best cell phone plan? Now it's Trot. Sorry. Now it's try. But what was it before? Do you remember what it was before?
The US.
Yeah, it was the middle one. This was 0.6, this was 0.39, this was 0.4 something. But because a lot of the weightings, look, what's heavy in weighting? This is, and look, isn't that a value of 1? And this is a heavy weighting. That's a 0 value that loses a lot there. So you get a whole 0.29 here, whereas here you only get 0.13. Big difference. This was your other heavy weighting, wasn't it? And look again, quality of service was the heavy weighting, and so was monthly, and both of these are 1s. That's why Trot ended up winning. The highest value here, though, look, this was a heavy weighting also. This should be 0.24. These are typos, I apologize. These should be 0.24, right here. So 0.24, though, times 0 is still 0. And this should be 0.24 times that should be 0.12. Okay, so that's going to be 0.49. The idea, though, I want you to see here is that the weightings end up getting multiplied each time. Okay, so the best plan, it turns out, is try. It is try in this case. That's really all there is to this method. But I think it goes right into the next part. Yeah, this is to do it yourself. So if you want to, let's see how much time we have. No, it's going to bring it down. It's 12. So here's what I want you to do over the weekend. I want you to read the next part of this book. The next part is the next excerpt on choosing a college. It says that Enrique goes to college. You start on the book. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. If anyone doesn't have the book either, take pictures of your classmates' books in those pages, or come see me. I'm not going to just photocopy for no reason. That's all your homework is for the weekend, guys. Hey, one other thing I should mention, and I mentioned this to like 2 or 3 of you. You need to have looked at the solution to the summer packet and compare it to yours. So over the weekend, you don't have to sit there and redo it. Just go through the whole summer packet and check the solution manual that's on Moodle. Just sit there and cross it off if it's wrong, so that we can analyze this next week and say, what were the areas that you really struggled with, maybe I can focus on more this year. Okay, if you didn't give Luca your homework from last night, give it to him. If it's a hard copy. Have a good week over the next couple days of field trips, guys.